My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Ben Bugale.
And welcome to pixelprojectradio. We are a video game and video games discussion podcast where we play through some of our favorite games and some of yours too. We do some deep dive analyzations, we do some plot summaries, and most of all, we just talk about our experiences playing these games. And today, we've got a special one. What are we talking about today, Ben?
Today we're talking about the game that I've actually brought to display to you as we record this live. This 25-year-old cartridge, approximately 25 years old, of GoldenEye 007 for the N64.
There he is. I see him. There's Pierce Brosnan in all his suave glory.
He's Irish. Did you know that?
I did. I learned that today.
It's wild. It's wild.
Yeah, this is an interesting game and a very important game in terms of just history of video games. But before we get into our personal histories with the game, why don't we tackle our sentence or two short review and give it our rating?
Après vous, monsieur.
Okay. Yeah, I can go first. I think this one's going to be a little different. So, here's how I felt. By today's standards, GoldenEye for the N64 shows its age, though in part due to its legacy, it wears its age well. It's a piece of history, and an important one, birthing a genre that has become ubiquitous to the notion of gaming. For this alone, it's worth a play. So that's how I felt about it. However, due to some things that we're going to talk about moving forward, I am going to decline rating this game.
Really?
And it's not because I didn't enjoy it, and it's not because I'm not generally a first-person shooter fan. It's not because I've only seen one James Bond movie, which I'm sure we'll talk about too. It's more to do with the fact that, I played this for the first time in 2022 using emulation, mouse and keyboard, 60 FPS. So I'm going to decline rating it with a number. I mean, we're still going to talk about it and talk about what we felt it does well and didn't do so well. So in that sense, I will be passing judgment. But in terms of a number, I'm going to sit back on this one because you have much more of a storied history with this game. So I'm much more interested to hear how you felt.
Oh, sure. I mean, I've been playing this game literally since I was 5, but that's curious. I'll be curious to hear if you change your mind on this, if you have a number at some point, because even through mouse and keyboard, I'm curious to see how it felt for you, which I know we'll get into the weeds of that. My review is as follows. Though it hasn't aged brilliantly, GoldenEye has forever changed the landscape of the first-person shooter genre of game. Based on the more or less flop of a movie, depending on who you ask, of the same name, GoldenEye still warms the hearts of Nintendo 64 loving 90s kids and has earned its place in the crown of games. I'd give it a 9 out of 10.
I think that's more than fair. Although I think a lot of people would take issue with calling GoldenEye the movie a flop.
Let me look up what its rating was on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's roughly 80% from what I remember.
I don't need to. Yeah, it's an 80% on the tomato meter. The audience gave it an 83. I just remember, and maybe it's my dad's bias coming through, is the fact that he grew up, he was a big Sean Connery and even an occasional Roger Moore fan of Bond. And I know that it's heralded and it's held in high praises by a number of people, but yeah, it just, I don't know. I'd more sooner watch Thunderball or Dr. No than this guy. Nothing again. I mean, it hit me weird, which I know we'll talk about because you said you've only watched one Bond movie, and I have a guess as to what it is.
Yeah, three guesses as to what that one might be. No, I watched GoldenEye earlier today, actually, the day of recording. I watched it earlier today. Let's talk about James Bond as a franchise right now. Based on writing, it's not a movie franchise, it's based on books, but it has become, for all intents and purposes, a powerhouse of a movie franchise. I have only watched GoldenEye, as I said. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of dumb fun, is kind of how I looked at it.
That's fair. Yeah.
How would you describe? You've obviously seen significantly more James Bond films than me. How would you describe the James Bond series as a whole? Right? James Bond 007. He is a secret agent. He's a spy with a license to kill, very famously. And, pretty much most Bond movies are about saving the world in one circumstance or another, wouldn't you say?
I mean, yeah, that's how I would describe it. I mean, he never dies, quote unquote. License to kill, absolutely. I don't know. They're, they came from Ian Fleming. And the character of James Bond was actually based on Christopher Lee. Did you know that?
I did. That's one of the few James Bond's facts. Well, it's more of a Christopher Lee fact, really, that I knew of. R.I.P. to that absolute legend.
An absolute legend. Yeah, no, it's very much, Bond gets himself into a situation where he's going to save the world, and he has to get the girl at the end of the movie. Like, I don't know. It has that, I don't even want to say 90s cheesiness, because in different decades you could kind of get that sense, but it's part of the DNA, is the shtick, and are some of those jokes.
That's one thing that I noticed watching this today, is it's filled with the inherent corniness that was just a part of the 90s, right? Like, it's almost, it transcends corniness and becomes its own 90s aesthetic that's just so over the top and not quite shticky, but it's just so delightfully indulgent and silly. And I was having a good time watching the film. It's not a series that's for me, but it was funny, it was exciting, it was something else. And we should mention GoldenEye was Pierce Brosnan's first role as James Bond, and from what I can tell, many folks consider it the best Pierce Brosnan Bond movie.
I would say that's fair. I would say it was his best as Bond. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's shticky, but I'm definitely saying that there is some shtick and there's some corn in the corniness of it. But there's a lot of really great stunt work. There's a lot of really great action. Yeah, I've watched a few Bond films, and let me tell you, they're they touch a soft spot in my heart, though. Again, Thunderball was a big one growing up. Never Say Never Again. Even Moonraker, which we'll probably touch on a little bit in this episode, but that's more for level selection later on. So,
yeah, for sure. So let's talk about what the game actually is. GoldenEye for N64 is more or less a direct retelling of the movie.
Yes, it is, with a few things obviously missing. But yeah, it basically is the action.
Yeah, there are nods to other Bond films. There are some time jump things in the game that don't occur in the movie, but painting in broad strokes, or I guess even medium-sized strokes, the plot is the same. It's basically the movie, and that plays into the release. This game, GoldenEye, released in August on the 25th of 1997, which was actually closer to the sequel of GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies. However, the game started its development in 1995, I believe before GoldenEye released, I'm pretty sure. Because GoldenEye, the film, didn't that release in November of 95, Ben?
I think you're right about that, yeah.
But it was originally intended to be sort of a promotional game for the movie. As we get into development, we'll talk about how, that kind of came and went, but it did release 2 years later, around the time of the sequel.
Yeah, it did. And it was rated T for teen, ages 13 and up. And my sorry 5-year-old ass was smiling ear to ear, just happy as a clam.
Yeah, that rating came about largely due to some Nintendo things, but we'll get into that with the development too. Mm-hmm. This was a obviously a game for the N64, the Nintendo 64. It was one of a few games that was possible to get bundled with the console. And
Yes.
it is ultimately the third best-selling N64 game of all time, slightly above Ocarina of Time, slightly below Mario Kart 64. And of course, number one spot, we all know, Super Mario 64.
Yes, for those of you who are sitting there going, what? The top 10 are Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, GoldenEye 007, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Super Smash Bros., Pokemon Stadium, was kind of shocking, but it also makes sense, Donkey Kong 64, Diddy Kong Racing, Star Fox 64, and then 10, Banjo-Kazooie, which let me just say this about that, because, we're kind of starting to teeter towards development. Rare. Holy cow. Powerhouse of the 90s.
Yeah, and it's a real shame that, well, they kind of tried to continue, but it's a shame that they never reached that height again, because truly, even as a PlayStation kid, even I knew that Rare was pumping out some of the best games of the time, at the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
So do you want to take us into the development since you kind of hinted at it, Ben?
Oh, I suppose I can at least get us on the right track there. And for those of you keeping score at home, we are talking about GoldenEye 007 for the N64 1997, not GoldenEye 007, the 2010 re-edit Call of Duty copycat Daniel Craig. I mean, cool that he used Daniel Craig, but come on, it's Pierce Brosnan anyway. Yeah, so again, Rick, you kind of spoke about it, developing around the same time as the film, and it came out closer to the sequel. It was in development for a little while. I think it was 2.5 years or so. The team, again, it was developed by the British studio Rare, and it was directed by a man by the name of Martin Hollis, who'd worked on the Killer Instinct. Now, this is a game I have literally no history with, but apparently it's one of them arcade games of sorts.
Yeah, and that's what's super interesting about this is Killer Instinct was Martin Hollis's first claim to fame. It was his first mark on his CV, and it's a coin-op. It's an arcade machine that's sort of, if I'm remembering correctly, it's like a railgun shooter, a light gun shooter, and originally, that was what GoldenEye was supposed to be. It was going to be sort of on-rails light gun shooter, sort of like Sega's Virtua Cop, which this was, heavily inspired by.
Yep.
What's even more interesting still is that this small team, I think it was, I could very well be getting this wrong, but I believe it was less than 10, led by Hollis, which is small in those days. Crazy small now. They largely did not have experience working on video games, which I think is just astounding.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if they would have known that they were making something this monumental. Other games that were influential in their development were, we kind of all, when I think about first-person shooter games, I think about different monuments, and Doom was certainly influential. And from an N64 3D standpoint, Super Mario 64 were actually very, very influential to that end.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the legacy of this game towards the end, but one of the big things that made this game stand out was the fact that they left this railgun shooter aesthetic and they allowed 3D movement that was closer to something like Doom or Quake. What they didn't do that was like Doom or Quake was they sort of slowed down the gameplay. This is not a run and gun kind of thing. It's not a bullet hell. It's not a ramp and rave sort of like Doom. It's more deliberate. It's slower paced. There are stealth elements which are done very well in this game for the time. And, another aspect of that deliberacy and that slow nature is due to the controls, but we can talk about that in a bit. But suffice to say, this game sort of evolved from what it was originally planned to be into a powerhouse of the N64's library. And it's just super interesting, right? Like, imagine this studio of folks that just largely haven't worked on games coming in, doing this incredible hallmark in the console's library, and then just saying, all right, we're done. That's so wild to me.
Yeah, they were like, no, peace, I'm out. It took them 2.5 years. I think their budget was somewhere around $2 million at the time, US dollars, that is, because I know that Rare was mentioned, so people are going to be trying to keep score of that. I don't know, this game, it's really fun to be covering this game from a number of standpoints and just reading through some stuff and playing through it again. This is just cool. I don't know.
I particularly was really interested in reading about how this game developed and came to be. Not that I didn't like playing it, because I did, but it's just got such an interesting history. Ben, you mentioned that this was in development for 2.5 years. They obviously wanted this out with GoldenEye, the movie, but by Hollis's words, nobody really expected them to do very well, because licensed games generally weren't considered to be system sellers. You had your Mario 64s, you had your Legend of Zeldas, but games that were based on movie IPs or, Disney or things like that, as infamous as Aladdin has become, they generally, licensed games weren't considered to be home runs, So Hollis mentioned that although they were working like 80-hour weeks on average, largely because they were just super jazzed and passionate about the project, he said that as long as they were working and doing something, people really didn't bother them, because they weren't expected to do a slam dunk. It was, it was a promotional for the film.
And to that end, from a development standpoint, we talked just lightly about this earlier. The story of the game, which we will get to eventually, is really, it's cinematic writing. So, like, you are basically doing all of the action scenes that existed in the movie GoldenEye, which, spoiler alert, there's a lot of. There are a lot of those scenes. There's a bunch of other little notes about, like, guns being named after different people on the team, and it's kind of fun. You can tell that the studio genuinely enjoyed themselves, and I don't know if they were setting out to make something this, extraordinary in the field, but when I think about N64 first-person shooters, the only other game that I think of that people said was an amazing game, and it was, but I still don't think it touched GoldenEye's legacy, was Perfect Dark. It's the only other game that I think of.
And this team, or at the very least Hollis, worked on that too. I think Hollis left the company before it was finished, but he's still listed in the credits, and he still had his fingers in that pie. You mentioned the gun thing. That was something that Nintendo kind of put their foot down on. Like, they didn't want the names of real guns in their game.
Yeah.
Because Nintendo. And so what they did was they took their own names. They kind of just went around to each person and said, hey, what would you want a gun named after you to be? So it would be like, I don't remember any from the game just offhand. Apologies for that. But my name is Rick Firestone. It would be like if they named my gun R.F. Ire or something like that. Like, just cool little nods that probably
R-Fire 93 or something like that.
Yeah. It's just cool little things like that probably made working on this game all the more fun for them. Because that's something too. They worked crazy long hours, as we mentioned, averaging 80 by Hollis's own words. But it was all because they wanted to. Like, it's not an issue of ethics as far as crunch goes. It's not an ethical issue in terms of workers' rights and work-life balance. They, by all accounts, wanted to do this. And they took their time, because it took 2.5 years. Their biggest thing was they wanted to make the game that they wanted to see. And I think that's really neat. I still don't love the idea of 80-hour work weeks, but it's what they wanted to do by all accounts.
Suppose we could move into some elements of development, such as the visuals and the audio side of things.
Yeah, sure. So you played this as a kid. What did you think of the visuals then, and how do you feel like they hold up now?
As a child, I was blown away. I'd never seen anything like this. I think it was like the first real first-person game I'd ever played. You could go first-person in like Ocarina of Time and like look around, but you couldn't move. In this game, that was everything. You were, piloting this human. It was wild. I thought the graphics were amazing at the time, because like every game we played from the years 1997 to like 2014, quote, there's no way it can get better than this. And it keeps happening. Because what was the other Bond game I had on N64? The World Is Not Enough, I think. I played that and I loved it, but, they had faces that had a little bit more expression to them. But this isn't about that right now. I loved the graphics at the time. I didn't see how they could get any better, but of course I had, limited memory, and it was all pretty, polygonal, and the colors were very appropriate for the times, and some interesting choices there. What were your thoughts, Richard?
Yeah, as far as the graphics go, it's like they're obviously they've aged, and there's no getting around that. It looks like an N64 game. It doesn't have the unique qualities that kind of permeate, like, let's say, the Zelda or the Mario series. It doesn't have that kind of personality. But what they were going for more was realism. I mean, Pierce Brosnan is Bond. Like, he's on the cartridge, and that is who you play as. And it kind of looks like him.
Little bit, yeah.
And I didn't write down the other names of the actors, so forgive me. But Natalia, for example, it's her in the game. Onatop, it's her in the game. So they were going for more of that realistic look. And, I don't think anybody could truly and genuinely and earnestly call these graphics bad, because, I mean, one, at the time they weren't, but two, they are of a time, and there's some charm to that, even now looking at it, it's like, again, we talk about managing expectations all the time on this show. You're not going to go in expecting a AAA studio from today and seeing GoldenEye and, being content. It's got its charm. It is goofy. It does look silly. It's polygonal bodies with like human faces pasted on. There's a silliness to it, but it's charming.
A 96 megabit cartridge, though, as I hold up GoldenEye 007 in my hand and look at it, and then I think about what we're able to do with the Switch now, it really is like pant shitting, mind blowing. You know what I mean? How far we've come with games, and insane.
Yeah, we've come a long way. It's who'd have thought back then that we'd have knockout games like Knack or Knack 2?
Knack 2, please, yes.
Are you kidding me?
Get out of town. How'd you feel about the sound design in this game?
Very positive, but before we jump off the visuals,
Yeah.
One thing that's super cool, I would imagine was super cool seeing at the time, was the attention to detail in terms of like the explosions and the bullet holes that would stay on the walls.
Oh, yeah.
That had to have been super cool seeing this at the time, because most games didn't really do that, I believe.
No, a lot of them didn't. Now, eventually, after a certain period of time, your bullet holes do disappear. But also, and Rick, I don't know if you're privy to this, but there would be things like if you threw a throwing knife at an enemy, it would stick out of them. They paid a lot. There was a lot of attention to detail in this game, and the reason I say that to you is if you hadn't seen the knives sticking out of someone's head, I played a lot of multiplayer with this game growing up, like a lot, especially Slappers Only, which is just the best possible name for a multiplayer duel for like hitting each other with your hands. And where you got shot, that part of your polygonal shoulder would turn red. They made sure that when someone was shot, they were, actually mortally wounded.
Yeah, the hit detection is great. I mean, if you shoot somebody in the groin, they're going to hold their groin. They're not just going to fall over. Oh yeah, they do. Believe me, anytime I could aim at the groin, that's where we're going. And
they very playful. This is the perfect marriage of the cheese. You know what I mean? Like you shoot someone in the groin, and they're like hold in on it, or like you shoot them a certain way and they stand straight up, like as straight and erect as possible, and then they fall to their knees, and the rest of their torso is still straight up, and then they fall face down. It's like there's some comedic ways that some people fall down. My favorite is the guy holding his ear. It's like, I'm sorry, if you got shot in the head, you're not going to be able to go, ooh. No, it's
that
great.
kind of tracks too with the James Bond IP. Is like,
yes,
it doesn't take itself overly seriously. There is an inherent, like, I think I was reading a Roger Ebert review of GoldenEye, but like everybody's in on the joke except for the characters, which kind of goes away in GoldenEye when they start to become more self-aware, from what I understand. But like, it's funny. They know it's funny, and that translates to the game. Like some of these people falling down, it's pretty comical.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and Boris has a few lines in the game that are in the movie, and they're funny. And I'll give him that. It's just I don't know if I've watched too much Downton Abbey in recent years or what, but I look at this and I don't feel like it's low or anything. There's so much of it where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just throw it in a pot and call it fondue. You know what I'm saying? I love it. This game is forever in my heart.
I don't know what you're saying, but I think I follow.
Cheesy.
That's the second cheese reference that you've made in 4 minutes.
Get ready.
Are
if
there
you're
more?
lactose intolerant, just warning right now.
Man, these puns are no Gouda.
Oh, no, they aren't.
No Gouda, ladies and gentlemen.
No
Gouda.
Gouda.
It's like those comedians that would be on the stand-up stage, kind of like pulling at their collar, repeating their punchline. We awake out there, ladies and gentlemen. No Gouda.
Rick, you mentioned the explosions and the gunshots and the bullets. I think that's a good pivoting point for sound design. They did an awesome job with the sound of discharged ammunition.
Yes. I pivoted away from your attempt to pivot to sound, but let's go there. It's great. There's no two ways about it. The sound design in this is awesome.
It is absolutely fantastic, the things that they were able to do for the time. Like, when I was watching the opening to GoldenEye, it was literally the exact same sound. Like, the gun echo, the ping was identical in the movie to the video game. That was unheard of in those days.
And the gunshot that this game is sort of known for, that's become so famous. Like, it's almost an identifier of this game. You hear that sort of silence, and you instantly know, okay, we're dealing with GoldenEye N64.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. I hope that it's playing somewhere. I hope that it can just insert a little, you know what I mean? So that it can sound. But the explosions are also very organic sounding, I think, pound for pound. There are scenes with like tanks and airplanes. I mean, none of it sounds, for being a video game in that era, they busted their asses to make this game sound and look as good as possible. And even as I was playing it the other day, Victoria and I were trying to watch the movie. And then I went back to playing the game, and she was like, yes, I'd much rather watch this. But like, she was also very impressed because she didn't grow up with that game in her library of Nintendo 64 games. Whereas it was so heavily in mine that I wrote my name on it with permanent marker as to make sure no one stole it. 5-year-old logic.
Oh no, writing on the game.
Look at this. Do you see that?
I can't really read it, but yeah, I see it.
Yeah, well, you can't read it because my handwriting hasn't changed since I was 5 years old.
I can't read it because of that. You listeners can't read it because this is an auditory medium. So this is our joke.
Can you listen with your eyes? Can you see with your ears?
Okay, high school band director. Listen with your eyes. Another thing that makes this so analogous to the movie, speaking of sound design, is they got the sweetest licensing deal ever when it came to this music. They were
Oh my God.
They were told in no uncertain terms to use as much of the music as possible. Like I believe that's actually what happened. The meeting with the lawyers went in such a way that they were like, yeah, make sure you're using this music. Like, we're giving it to you, so use it. And use it they did. The opening to this is, I mean, it's perfect. It's exactly what you would expect out of a Bond film, just on an N64.
Oh yeah, and they used a lot of, they used a lot of the 1995 sounds too, like with certain like orchestra hits and other sorts of sounds that just like transport you to the era, but not in a bad way. It's very organic and very true to itself. The music. I mean, this is, Koji Kondo, right? We all talk about Koji Kondo, especially on this podcast. A lot of lessons in theme and variations. The same thing is true of this. They take that Bond theme and it's like in every single level hidden somehow. And I love it. It's brilliantly crafted. Each of the levels, I mean, I could sit here and list off what I like about the music in each level, but like, I got to the archives level and I heard the music there and I was transported, and same thing. What's the other level that has the Control, has some really cool music to it too. And I was just like, wow, we are back to being 5 years old and it's snowing outside and I'm not going to school for some reason.
Just to put some names to the praise that we're heaping onto this, and Ben, I'm not sure if you'll know any of these names. I am, remiss to say that I don't. But the film GoldenEye, was the composer on that was a gentleman named Eric Serra. He is a French composer and musician. He's done some avant-garde stuff, but in terms of movies, he's done, I think, Bulletproof Monk, The Fifth Element, and GoldenEye, to name a couple. Our in-house composers for the game, we've got Graham Norgate, who was a Rare guy, Rare being the company. And I'm sure he was a Rare guy in terms of being a cool dude.
But
pulling my collar up here. He also did the music for Donkey Kong Land and Blast Corps. We've got Grant Kirkhope. He did some of the music for DK64 and Banjo-Kazooie, as well as Perfect Dark, it says here. And Robin Beanland, best name out of the bunch, who did Killer Instinct and Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yep.
That's a game. That is a game.
It is. He also did Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. He did, apparently, it says here he was the original game supervisor for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It's also worth mentioning that Grant Kirkhope, is his name? Kirkhope. He also worked on Ukulele in The Impossible Lair.
No kidding.
And Ukulele, yeah. So, I mean, he was one of those people who came back from Rare and was like, I'm doing this.
That's great. All right. Yeah, and I mean, can't heap enough praise onto the music and sound design. It's just, there's nothing about it that I don't like.
No, it's really nice that in a first-person shooter game that was so important and is such a crowning achievement in the N64 gamut, but also in first-person shooters of all time, that music was not an afterthought. It was not, and it wasn't just music that's like, here's this ominous like brass music that just sounds intense. It was like, there was some really intricate, you can tell the amount of care that was put into each level's music and how they made it as atmospheric as possible. I think about what is that one level called? I can't remember. It scared the crap out of me. Statue. When I was little, that level scared the living daylights out of me. But that's largely in part because of the music, the way it's paired with the park. Ooh.
And, as far as licensed games go, if they're done well and there's no issues with the licensing or with the lawyers, sound design and music is often something that they do pretty well, right? I think back a lot to one of the games that I had as a kid that I played the heck out of because I was a kid and I didn't have anything else, Rugrats for the PS1. And the sound design for that, particularly the music, was the exact same stuff that you heard on the TV show. Thinking about other licensed games like Power Rangers, like the other Rugrats games, because there were quite a few of them for some reason.
Rugrats in Paris?
Rugrats in Paris, yeah.
Absolutely, baby.
Yeah, everybody was kung fu fighting. And Power Rangers, Animorphs, the Aladdin game. I'm in some ways Kingdom Hearts. We're never covering that, right?
When you walk away, you don't hear me say, "Please, oh baby, don't go." Rick, though it's 3:25, simple and clean. It's the way that you're making me feel tonight. It's hard to let go.
Master of Puppets pulling your string. Okay, not even a laugh. All right.
I was just sitting here like, yeah, okay. I'm feeling it,
But yeah, anything else to say about the sound design? I mean, the footsteps are great, the music is great, the pinging and the shooting of the guns, even the karate chops are great.
Yep.
Hearing the enemies grunting.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say about it. Just that's one of my favorite parts of the game.
It's worth mentioning there's no voice acting in this at all. Everything is read.
Oh, yes. Yes, you're right.
So the only voices you hear are when you hit someone, male or female, and they will make a grunt in the octave in which their voices lie. That's interesting. So there's sometimes enemies that I think every single shot produces, at least almost every shot produces a noise, an utterance of some sort from an enemy. But you can tell that they're actual recordings of human voices and not just like mechanized like noises or anything. So that's all I have if you wanted to pivot into continuing in our development theme of controls and mechanics.
Well, there is one thing that I didn't write down here, but
Please.
You were mentioning it, so we might as well pivot into the levels. That's one thing that I don't have on here.
Oh, good golly goodness.
Yeah, let's talk about the levels. So throughout here, you play through a series of scenes through the movie, mostly from the movie, and there are a total of 20. Well, there are 18 regular and 2 bonus.
Right.
The solo modes are the dam, the facility, the runway, the surface, the bunker, silo, frigate, surface and bunker, part 2, statue, as you mentioned, Ben, the archives, the streets, depot, train, jungle, control, caverns, and cradle.
That's them, all right.
The 2 bonuses being Aztec and Egyptian, which I believe are references to other Bond films. Am I right, Ben?
Aztec is based on Moonraker, and Egyptian is based on The Man with the Golden Gun, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, let's hear it. Favorite level... let's do it this way. Favorite level that you played in the campaign, the story mode, and favorite level to do multiplayer. Because I, unfortunately, did not get the chance to play this as a kid.
Sure.
So I never got to do the multiplayer.
My favorite levels, because it's hard to choose. Well, it is and it isn't. Archives was my favorite as a kid. I loved Archives. I don't know if it was the music, and the fact that I'm sitting there like being interrogated with a gun in front of me, and I'm like, hee, but we'll get to that. I think there's some pretty good hidden weapons in Depot that I enjoyed as a kid. Jungle had no soundtrack. It's just the sound of animals. That was cool. I don't know. I could literally I could just wax poetic about all of these. What were your favorites?
Speaking of Jungle, I did like Jungle quite a bit. The fight with Onatop there, I believe it's Onatop.
Xenia Onatop, yeah.
Yes, sometimes I get the names a little mixed up. But
That's easy.
Yes, that was a cool fight. I like Jungle. I was just looking at it. Bunker. I liked Bunker. That was
part
a neat
1
one.
or 2.
Oh, the part where you're escorting Natalia with you.
That would be part 2.
Yeah. And then also, like you said, Archives is cool too. I actually did not play Aztec or Egyptian for this. I didn't make it there. So I unfortunately can't speak to that. But the multiplayer list was a little different.
Yes. Yes, it is. Temple is a very vague temple. Complex is a very vague complex. Caves is kind of based on jungle. Library, basement, and stack are... Library is the surface version. Basement is the basement version. And stack is both. I don't know what else to say about those.
It looks like, based on what I'm looking at here, there's also facility, bunker 2, archives, caverns, and Egyptian as well. So which did you like the most?
As a kid, if I had the chance to play Egyptian, because some of my friends had it unlocked and I didn't, it was great. But I also loved caverns for multiplayer. Stack got kind of annoying. Well, no, you didn't actually play this as a kid, did you? You didn't do these multiplayer.
No, I had one friend that had an N64. Well, I had one friend that I regularly hung out with at their house that had an N64. My other friends that I hung out with at their houses had PlayStations. And he did not have GoldenEye. That was just something that he wasn't into. So, never got a chance to do that as a kid. And I know we were going to pivot into mechanics, but we're already hovering on multiplayer. Do you want to talk about that?
I think so. Just a few more things I want to camp out on level-wise, just for a hot second.
Yeah, keep that fire going, because we're camping, baby.
There's some really cool things in archives. I think that also made me love them, like hidden doors. Did you find any of those?
I may have found one, but I'm not certain.
There are walls that if you go up to them and you hit the door open button on, they will open and you can go into a secret passageway.
I think I found one, but that's all.
Yeah, no, that makes archives particularly fun. Control is the hardest level in the entire game. I don't care. No contest. Control is the hardest level in the entire game. I hate control. When I was very small, I had to have somebody else beat it for me because I could not. For the life of me. It makes me angry. And it still made me angry 2 days ago. Yeah, no, multiplayer is a good thing for us to pivot into, I think, at this point. But all of the levels are good. I mean, they're well manicured.
Yeah, there's not really any that stood out as objectively bad. Some of them felt more tedious to me. And I'll admit, the first level, the dam, didn't really grab me. It wasn't anything spectacular, and I definitely remember one of them feeling tedious, but I don't quite remember which one I felt that way about. But multiplayer is probably what this game is best known for.
I would agree with that.
And the funny thing is, too, is that it almost wasn't included. It was a relatively last-minute inclusion, but again, it stemmed out of the folks that were working on this. That was just something they wanted to see and they wanted to do. It was something that they would have played and had fun with. So they said, yeah, forget it. We're putting it in. And now it's kind of the thing this game's most famous for.
Oh yeah, there are so many different ways, so many different weapon choices, that you can choose between to make it happen. There are a lot of different characters you can play as in multiplayer as you unlock more people. You can play people from other games like Baron Samedi. You can play as Jaws. You can play as Orumov. You can play as Natalia. You can play as Bond. You can play as Alec. You can play as Xenia. You can play as like so many different people from so many different Bond games. Odd Job, like come on.
I was gonna say most notoriously Odd Job, and
you can't shoot him.
I don't, because he's a little
small.
guy. I don't know if this was said in jest, but somebody was asking Hollis about whether it's cheating to play Odd Job in multiplayer, and he said, "Yeah, of course it is." So from the mouth of the creator, you're a cheater if you play Odd Job. Oh
yeah.
They originally, from what I understood, wanted to include all of the different Bonds, like Connery and, Pierce was the fifth one. Everybody up to him. Roger Moore, I think, was before him.
Roger Moore, yep.
But they wanted to include all of them. And licensing got kind of muddy, and I forget if it was Nintendo or the IP holder of the Bond films that said no. Somebody speculated that it was because I think maybe Connery would have got involved and wanted to be paid for a stuff. I don't
Probably.
know. But the licensing got murky, suffice to say. So we did not get all of the different bonds. So that would have been pretty cool, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Oh, it
that
would have
happen
been.
in the remake? Do you know?
What, all of the bonds being represented?
Yeah, or was it just Craig?
I think it was just Daniel Craig, but I can't actually say for sure. What were we about to pivot into? Because I want to pivot to something, but I want to make sure that I'm not pivoting away from
We
what you
got
want to
Odd
pivot
Job
into.
distracted us.
Yeah, you did. Do you have a favorite gun in the game, Rick?
I'm gonna be honest, not really. I just kind of had a blast playing through all of them. Um, One thing that we didn't talk about was difficulty levels.
Oh, yes, that's
There
important
are
too.
there are four of them, and I always forget one. There's Agent, there's Secret Agent,
Hmm.
there's 007, and what's the one I'm forgetting?
That's a great question because those are the only three that I ever saw on my game because those are the only three I ever did. I always only thought there were three, but
Yeah, so there's the one that I was forgetting was 00 Agent. In order of difficulty, it
oh,
goes
the middle
Agent,
one, yeah,
Secret Agent, 00 Agent, and then 007.
just straight up.
Now, I believe 007 you needed to unlock. You had to play through the campaign on all three other difficulties to unlock it. But that was the hardest mode. And after that, I think, too, after you clear 007, you get a custom. Or maybe it is 007 that's the custom, where you get to change how many hits enemies take to die, how strong they are, things of that nature. Which, again, at the time, very, very cool to have that little, like, play as your own developer sort of thing. But, anyways, I wanted to mention that before we go on. I will admit, here and now, even playing on 60 FPS on mouse and keyboard, I played through on agent setting, the easiest
Same.
setting.
Yep.
Not because I wanted to start an argument with anybody, but partly because of time. It's just I wanted to get through the game. But also, well, no, I won't lie. It was just to get through the game.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's fair.
But I did play a couple levels on the Secret Agent and 00 Agent levels. They are a little more fun, especially with mouse and keyboard, because, it's just a bit more of a challenge. You have to be a bit more crafty. You're not sort of just breezing through things.
It's appropriately more challenging, and I think it's a fair tier system. You have some more objectives you have to fulfill depending on what level you're playing at, and that's fun and a pain in the ass, depending. For all of you folks listening who are fans of particular guns in this game, I'm just going to tell you right now, my favorite is the RCP-90 and the Cougar Magnum, especially because of the amount of cheat codes that are in this game, because there are a lot of cheats that you can unlock through doing all of these different, and that's how you actually get the later levels. Aztec and Egyptian is through playing the different difficulty levels, is playing different levels in different amounts of time, and eventually you can have cheat codes where you're just like, I'm going to make sure that I at any moment have the Phantom on me, or I'm going to make sure that I have the automatic shotgun or the golden gun itself.
Yeah, the Golden Gun. Haven't seen that movie, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
Golden gun only shoots one bullet at a time, but it's generally a one-hit kill.
Love it. High risk, high reward.
You have to reload it all the time. It's so bad.
Man, we talked about this in the Diddy Kong episode, but this is from another era when cheat codes were just sort of a thing that was expected and given to you for doing well. Like two of the cheat codes that I didn't try in this game, but I have watched videos of and I think are just great, are the big head mode.
DK mode, absolutely.
Everything had a big head. DK mode.
That's what it's called.
Can you
yeah.
imagine? How do you think it would go if DK was in this game? It's a rare joint, so it shouldn't have been too much trouble.
It could be a thing. I don't know.
Do you? Oh shit! Do you think he would use his banana slammer or his coconut gun?
I would think the coconut gun.
It does fire in spurts, and I've heard if he shoots you, it's gonna hurt.
You've either got fully automatic or, you know what I mean? So there's no burst weapons in this game.
Yeah, what I wouldn't give to play as Donkey Kong and just give him the old banana slammer DK special monkey feet fist to on a top and the other Russians in this game.
You'd kick some tail.
Just take them take him down as DK and then go into a full music video because Donkey Kong. How did we get onto that? Cheat codes.
Yep.
DK mode, that's the big head one, but the paintball one, the paintball cheat code.
Absolutely.
That's super cool.
It was awesome.
And it looks terrific. Even by today's standards, it looks pretty darn cool.
Yes, it does. I would agree. But we should, since we've been talking about guns and cheat codes and stuff, we should probably pivot into controller styles and how aggravating those could be, especially whenever you're 5 years old and you accidentally shift your controller styles from honey to kissy, and you have no idea what you've done, and you can't get out of the menu because all the buttons have changed.
And you all know what that means. It's time to talk controls. So the control schemes in this game. So I wanted to say up front that it's interesting because when Hollis pitched this idea, this GoldenEye game, to the Rare executives, because that's who he pitched it to. It wasn't to Nintendo. It was to like the uppers in Rare. The N64 hadn't come out yet, and Nintendo was being tight-lipped about what the controller was going to look like. So at that time, all we had was the NES and the SNES controller. We didn't know that there was going to be joysticks or anything like that. There was probably a hunch that there would be, but the N64 controller was not unveiled yet. So Hollis's pitch and how he said the game would control was deliberately very vague, and given with how this is implemented, I just find that to be so fascinating. Because this does not control as one would think a shooter should control by today's standards.
But man, did it work.
It did something.
Oh, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about that June is busting out all over video, and I'm like, it has to be good. Because it thanks be to God, it came out with like a trigger and a controller that felt that way under the hand. Because man, that would have been awkward. And thank goodness it had more. I shouldn't say more, but maybe as many buttons as one of Steve Harvey's suits.
Hey, who'd have thought Steve Harvey was going to make an appearance in this?
He's the next Bond, everybody.
I would pay to see that. Holy shit. Seeing Steve Harvey, what would fucking happen is one of the Bond girls would come up and be like, my name's Pussy Galore, and Steve Harvey would just look at the camera and with like that slack-jawed like, what did you say?
I don't want to host this show no more, as he says. It's my favorite Steve Harvey quote.
Speaking of that, of Pussy Galore,
yikes.
The control schemes in this,
yes,
there are actually quite a few, and they're all named after the Bond girls. Ben, why don't we each read 4? And we want to advise the listeners that this is a very serious podcast, and you're not allowed to laugh at any of these names if you haven't heard them before.
I will not laugh. So the default control setting is 1.1. It's Honey, and it's named after Honey Rider from Dr. No. Next we have Solitaire, named after Solitaire from Live and Let Die. These controls are, in my opinion, not horrible yet. I'm a honey person. Third, we have Kissy, named after Kissy Suzuki from You Only Live Twice. This is where we've strayed from God. The next we have Good Night, which is named after Mary Goodnight from The Man with the Golden Gun. This is where we are in the fires of hell.
Those are all single controller play styles. There are also dual controller play styles where you play with one controller in each hand. They're named as follows. There's Plenty, named after Plenty O'Toole from Diamonds Are Forever. No laughing. There's Galore, named after Pussy Galore from Goldfinger. There's Domino, named after Domino Vitale from Thunderball. No laughing. And there's Goodhead, named after Holly Goodhead from Moonraker.
Yep.
No laughing.
No laughing.
But these how would you describe how this controls, Ben? Because it does not control, partly because of the way the controller is designed, it does not control as one would expect a first-person shooter to work.
What, the two controller things?
Let's just stick to the one controller for now, because I reckon that's how most people played it.
Well, it actually, these controls made sense to me as a child. So, like, and to be honest, I got back to my inverted aim very quickly. It came back to me. I was like riding a bike, because the aiming is inverted. I don't know. It feels pretty ergonomic for me. Like, it feels very natural under the hands. Using R to aim, using C left and right to strafe, and then to use the Z to fire. But man, using C up and C down to look up and down drove me insane.
And see, that's where you and I differ, because like the fact that you use the control, and we're talking about the default honey setting, by the way. Using the C stick to move forward and backwards, but not to strafe left and right, that is a bizarre choice to me. Because, today you play with the WASD keys, and all of those move you. You don't look, you strafe. And to have the movement being divided into two different hands, that's bizarre to me.
I can understand that. I guess I never really sat down to think about it, but yeah, I always use the stick to like pivot, turn, go forward, all these things. But then the C buttons to go side to side, it was just kind of automatic for me.
It might be one of those situations where you grew up with it, so you're just used to it.
I think so. And also capitalizing on the fact that I don't think the developers realized that they made the strafe faster than actually running straight forward. So like in chases, I use the C left and C right button and just aim myself diagonally forward, and I am like a gosh darn cheetah.
You're breaking the game.
Imagine sidestepping at like 18 miles per hour.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
It'd be.
You know what they say? You only live twice.
That's it. Yep.
One thing that I find interesting is the first dual controller style. So they're designed to be played with your hand on the center of each N64 controller, and in the default, I don't know if you consider it a default, but it's the first one, so we'll call it that. The left hand, your left hand stick, up and down, you move, and oh no, wait, I think I was reading this wrong. Never mind. Yeah, that tracks. That's normal. But that's closer to what somebody would want today, a stick under each thumb, as it were. But I'm not sure how popular this was because, again, I was a child when this came out, and I wasn't exactly hip to talking about video games.
Well, and at the same time, in the grand scheme of everything, what other first-person shooter games that were relevant existed? You know what I mean?
Doom and Quake. It was largely stuff on PC.
Yeah, and in most cases, if you're hanging out with all of your friends, right, you're going to be gathered around a TV and a PlayStation or an N64. So, like, yeah, you've got Doom and you've got Quake, and they're great games. But man, this was the new kid in town.
Yeah, I don't remember offhand how Doom for N64 controlled. I would assume the C buttons were all like looking with the gun, but I'm not sure because I've personally never played Doom 64.
Me neither. Though as I look at the images, I mean, what a jump from this game to GoldenEye. Holy cow. Thanks be to God for Rare. But yeah, the controls to kind of keep us there not too long though. They really catered to anybody's style of control, and I thought that was cool. I thought that was kind of neat overall. Though at the same time, the fact that there are on the N64 8 different options is kind of insane.
It is. It really is. You didn't see that very often back then. Nowadays we've got controllers that are remappable with extra buttons. We've got entire keyboards that you can remap to suit your fancy. But having 8 controller variations, even so far as to have half of them using 2 controllers at once, it was pretty significant.
Oh yeah.
And it really just goes to show how near and dear this game was to Hollis and his team, that they're basically just building the game that they want to play.
Yeah. Which, by the way, speaking of controls, start is always pause, but whenever you go into your menu, you look at your watch as closely as possible. Basically, you hold up your wrist and you go into your menu, which is in your watch. And I just love that. It was so creative. It's so spy heavy. You can see your mission objectives, your controls. your health, which is displayed in your watch, and as you get shot, you're aware of your health. It's denoted by these reddish to yellow colored squares. And then another item, and to kind of jump back to the gun category for a second, body armor, which is a shade of blue. So you can also keep track of how that's doing in your menu as well.
Yeah. So all of this sort of culminates into this experience that has gone down in history as being one of the best N64 games of all time. And it was certainly thought of that way at the time. Do you want to move into reception?
I would be delighted to move into reception.
So as we sort of said before, like there weren't high expectations on this game, but people unironically loved it at the time.
Unironically and loved.
Yes, it sold third best out of the N64, as we mentioned before. Third best between Mario Kart on top and Ocarina of Time on bottom. Around 98, it had sold approximately 2.1 million copies, but only a few years later, in 2001, over 7 million. And I believe today it's sold over 8 million. I don't have that number in front of me, but I feel like I've read that several times at this point.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. Critically, by the numbers, if I may.
Yeah, please.
So I know that Rick covered kind of sales. As far as how it was received, Metacritic gave it a 96 out of 100 to jump down to some other publications. We've got Game Informer gives it an 8.5 out of 10, which I think is probably the lowest rating. IGN gives it a 9.7 out of 10. N64 Magazine gives it a 94%. Nintendo Power, 9 out of 10. GameSpot, 9.8 out of 10. And Game Revolution gives it an A-. And I think this is all completely justified praise. I mean, you can rate a game for all of the things that it does, but at the end of the day, how much fun did someone have playing it? I think that's kind of where the number ultimately has to come from, because games are meant for fun, and if you play for fun, you never lose. That's the case with this game. I think these are all perfectly acceptable scores. I love this game. Great game.
Yeah, perfectly acceptable and well earned. It's hard to, it's difficult today to look at a game from this era and truly appreciate the impact, I think. I think a lot of us are, we've become desensitized to games in installing and implementing new features and things like that. And it creates this sense of expectance with games. But this game really blew it out of the park its first time. Hollis's second game, and just knocks it out of the park. I think it was largely considered to be the best multiplayer game on the N64, and considering Mario Kart 64 was on the system, that is hell of a praise.
It does play better, and I know that I'm comparing two different genres, but if I could talk about pleasurable experiences playing multiplayer games, GoldenEye plays better, and I think there's music in all of the multiplayer levels too, which is not necessarily the case in Mario Kart.
Yeah, that's a sticking point for you, huh, with Mario Kart?
It irked me. It irked me very much. Like, not that it needs music, because I kind of like the intensity of multiplayer battles in Mario Kart, but like, if GoldenEye can do it, why can't you? Come on. If Diddy Kong Racing can do it.
Yeah, no, you're right.
No disrespect.
No, you're exactly right. It's a weird misstep.
Yeah, but anyhow, that's basically how it was received. Do you want to talk about the plot and story?
Yeah, let's visit the plot and story for a moment here. So as we mentioned towards the top, this was conceived as a promotional sort of thing to the movie, and as such, the plot of the game, the story mode of the game, is based on the movie. The plot is the exact same. So just to sort of talk about it in relatively larger strokes, you are playing as James Bond, and you're starting the mission at the dam, just like in the movie, You get to play a little bit before you do the famous opening dam jump, which is cool. Admittedly, it's cool.
Oh, it's great. It's just funny that the dam scene in the movie, is like 90 seconds, and they make a whole level out of it.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. But it's super cool when you get to the end of the level and you're sort of, in the game jumping off as Pierce Brosnan. Very cool. But in the movie, it's 1986. You are James Bond, and with your partner Alec Trevelyan, infiltrating a Soviet chemical weapons facility. To keep it short, Trevelyan gets caught. He gets shot, presumably dead, by Colonel Oryumov. And of course, because he's James Bond, he manages to escape before destroying the whole site. That's sort of the preamble, and then we get to modern day at the time, 1995, with this very weird scene of James Bond driving with somebody who was, quote, sent to analyze him. Some woman. Just
Caroline?
so much sexual bravado, just needless sexual bravado.
This is the cheese.
It's good cheese, though. It's good. I liked it. It's dumb fun.
Dumb fun is, yeah. No, that's exactly right.
But essentially, what's going on here is there is this crime syndicate called Janus, Janus. They are a crime syndicate, and at the start, Bond is trying to prevent Xenia Onatop from stealing this attack helicopter. Not quite able to do it. So you learn of the titular GoldenEye soon thereafter. It is a Soviet-era satellite with a nuclear electromagnetic pulse space-based weapon. This is the most 90s shit I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
Like having the Russians with a Soviet satellite that has nuclear space weapons. It's so post-Cold War. It's a little ridiculous. And I guess we should say, given current events, we didn't pick a game with a lot of great Russian characters and things like that to convey any message. Like we're very firmly pro-Ukraine, I think it's safe to say.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And this game is, I don't want to say anti-Russian.
Well, it paints a lot of the Russian characters in charming lights, to say the very least. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely.
So the Janus crime syndicate is suspected of initiating the attack via GoldenEye. Bond doesn't buy it. He thinks it was Oryumov, who is now risen to be a general. You're going back to St. Petersburg, and one of your contacts suggests that you meet with this former KGB agent named Valentin Zakrovsky to get a meeting with this crime syndicate. You do. It's a very entertaining scene because he's kind of making fun of Bond a little bit. Like he's got him held down at gunpoint and he's like, "Ooh, shaken, not stirred." And they all just kind of laugh at him. There's a very weird group of Russian women singing like karaoke style, and it's real bad. Did you make it that far in the movie?
I did not. I only made it 35 minutes into this movie and I couldn't. I'm going to watch Pride and Prejudice tonight or something,
It's very weird. They play it as a joke, but it's like, why is this here? It's funny. But anyway, you meet with this guy, the former KGB agent, and you do end up getting escorted to a meeting with Janus by Onatop, but you discover, dun dun dun, Janus is actually led by your former partner, Trevelyan. He faked his death, and you learn that his parents were actually the Cossacks who were what is the word? Repatriated to the Soviet Union after being in Britain for a while. So your former partner Trevelyan, he wants to take down Britain, and it's actually a pretty cool scene of the two of you sort of facing off, and you pull your gun, and he's like, "It's foolish of you to think that I haven't already anticipated your every move." At which is a very James Bond thing to say.
Yes, it is.
And Bond is, of course, like, "Well, shit, you're right." Very neat scene. But that sort of sets up the antagonist of the movie, and not to paint in too broad of strokes here, but largely the rest of the plot is James Bond stuff. Like that setting up to that point, setting up the antagonist is important, but after that, you were largely, I mean, you're James Bond, you're going to beat the bad guy, you're saving the world. I don't know how in depth, Ben, you want to go with these, with the story beats after that, but that's largely what happens.
That is largely what happens, and
I suppose I left out Boris, that antagonist.
yeah, he's kind of an antagonist. He's more of a comedic relief antagonist than anything else in the movie.
I cackled in the beginning when Boris has a password set up, and I forget who is it, Onatop, that is trying to get into the computer?
No,
or is
it's
it
Natalia.
When she's trying to get in to guess the password, and the password is knockers, with a picture of a woman with large boobs.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's so funny. I laughed so goddamn hard. It's that peak 90s. It surpasses corniness. It surpasses cringe, and it exists in its own bubble of just 90s vibe. And it's such a fun thing to revisit, and it's so fun to laugh at it because, again, we're in on the joke. We can laugh at it. Yeah, I don't know.
And you have to watch this movie knowing that. You can't watch this movie with feminist goggles on. You have to watch this movie from where it was in the year 1995, because it's just,
well, and that it's worth bringing up too. Like, we are laughing about it, but there are meaningful and very valid criticisms post Me Too era, specifically with like the misogyny that some of the Bonds have against women. There are scenes of legitimate sexual assault where James Bond sort of forces, not in this movie, but where James Bond sort of forces himself on women, just hits women just to get them to cooperate. And of course, the whole notion of a Bond girl.
Not great.
It's not kosher as we would see it today. But it's one of those things where if you view it through this lens, it's not fair to look at every piece of art pre-2022 with 2022 goggles.
Correct.
That's not meaningful to do, and it's not fair, and it doesn't serve anybody but the person viewing it. That being said, there are meaningful criticisms, and the notion of a Bond girl has always made me kind of itchy. I don't love it.
Yeah, it is. And to kind of take what Rick gave us a synopsis of the cinematic side of things. How's that for your daily alliteration? So I'm going to walk through the levels of the game as they pertain to the story, at least a little bit, because the story of the movie and the story of the game, I mean, you could read as much as you want because the story is kind of presented in files, and you kind of play the story. Again, you start at the dam. Your goal in agent mode, your goal is to literally just bungee jump off the dam. And that's fine, but you not without a little bit of bloodshed. You get to the facility where you meet up with Trevelyan, and you've found these tanks that you need to destroy. You do so. Trevelyan is shot. Odomov shows up, and a bunch of other Soviet soldiers show up. Then there's my favorite short level of the entire game, Runway. You literally make your way to a plane, transitioning from the facility to the runway, and leave. And fly, for those of you who are fans of the Avatar ride in Disney World, and are into how annoying that is. Then we have this huge rift in the movie, like between, there's no bravado car chase scene between runway and surface, but next we're trying to power down this giant satellite, which we eventually learn is part of the GoldenEye weapon. We break into the bunker. The surface is that fourth level, covered in snow. It's like, in Siberia, Severnaya, I believe. We get into the bunker. We find out more of the GoldenEye. I don't remember if this is where we copy the GoldenEye disc or not, or if that's in Bunker 2 Electric Boogaloo.
I'm not 100% certain. The levels that you revisit in this tended to run together just a bit to me.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. After Bunker, we're in Silo, which is like a Russian missile rocket ship kind of plant of sorts. You have to take pictures of satellites and other things to report back to headquarters. The next level's frigate. You find that helicopter that Rick mentioned earlier, and you bug it so that it can be tracked. And the goal in this mission is to save hostages, which I was horrible at as a child. I was very bad at saving people's lives. I was 5 or 6 years old. What can I say?
You didn't understand the implications of morality quite at
Not
that
like
level.
that. I mean, it was like, I think it was mainly because there were words I couldn't read at that point. I was like, what is this? What am I doing? Oh.
And I mean, the morality of most of us at that time was grabbing the penguin in Mario 64 and throwing him over the edge. That's kind of where we were at. We didn't understand things deeper than that.
Well, you see, and the thing is that I never had Mario 64, so my morality was never challenged. I still
you were
don't.
never tainted.
That's a way of putting it. But like whenever I read like hostage escaped, is that must be some sort of synonym for escaped, and it was executed, and like I didn't know.
Oh shit!
So it was not great.
It's a form of escape, but it's not the one that you want.
No, it's not. The next level's surface. It's a revisit to the surface level from earlier. Your goal is to get back into the bunker, but you're caught. You're put into a cell. That's where you meet Natalia. The goal at this point, I believe for sure, is to research, steal information from the bunker, including the GoldenEye disc statue. Super scary level for me as a kid. That's where Trevelyan is like, surprise, I'm the bad boy. The back half of this level is kind of neat. You know, got to rescue Natalia from the helicopter that's about to explode, etc. Archives, you're held and being interrogated. When you escape the archives, somehow Ourumov has taken Natalia, and you can take a tank through the streets of St. Petersburg. Not bad. When you get to the end of those streets, you go to the depot. From the depot, you get on the train, because you're just basically following Ourumov, Trevelyan, and your kidnapped Natalia. The jungle level has no music, as mentioned. You settle the score with Xenia Onatop once and for all, who's wielding, I think, an RCP-90 and a grenade launcher. So
the grenade launcher got me for sure.
Just the fact
It's
that
a cool
she's casually holding one in one hand, or
it got me in the sense that I was like, yeah, that's cool, but it also literally got me in the sense that it depleted my life.
Oh yeah. No, I had a moment. I had a flashback where I was like, what's the significance of this bridge? And I went, shit, and I pulled out all of my mines and just lined the bridge with them. And then she was like, you're not going to survive this. And I was like, the hell I'm not. And I just blew up the bridge. Then comes my least favorite level, Control, because Natalia is defenseless and it just turns into a shooting gallery. And this is where the goal is to shut down the GoldenEye satellite, which, you know, is aimed at London. And then you're basically just chasing Trevelyan through the caverns, on the cradle. And then you shoot Trevelyan, and then you jump on a helicopter, and then you kiss Natalia in the jungle for a very long time as the end credits play.
Yeah, those credits, it's like a solid 2.5 minutes of just polygonal makeout sesh. Not great.
No, it's not great.
One cool thing in the movie, when Trevelyan first reveals that he's the traitor in what would be the statue level, he goes off on this thing about how, like, you know, Bond isn't loyal to his friends. He's only loyal to the mission, and only loyal to like Britain and London and England. And right as Bond's going to kill Trevelyan, Trevelyan asks if he's killing him for England, and Bond says, no, it's for me. And then drops him. That's pretty cool. I like that.
It's a good line. And they do, even though there's no voice acting, they do make sure that the text is readable from some of the more significant lines. The lines from the movie that are, you know, half of everything is luck and the other half fate. Great line. Yeah. Great line. They make sure that stuff is in there.
One thing that you were mentioning, Ben, as you went along that I wanted to touch on is another way that this game sort of deviates from how we would play a modern shooter is if you just boot up and play each mission, you don't read the files and you're just going, you're not going to really experience the plot in a meaningful way. The
No.
plot lies in reading the mission files and doing the objectives, right? There are specific, like you mentioned, Ben, there are specific objectives. You don't just run and gun to the end of the level and kill everybody. There are things that you have to get and things that you have to do. And reading the case files is going to give you background and give you the plot, not the voice acting or the text. So that's important to note.
Yeah, you can, and depending on, again, what level of intensity you play this mission on, I don't know, it can get tedious if you go 00 agent and etc. But like, I don't know. Boris does almost nothing in the game.
Yeah, certainly not as big of an impact as he has in the movie. So we're kind of getting to the end of what this game is. We've mentioned the legacy on and off throughout the episode, but I think it's worth circling back and touching on it once more. It's difficult to overstate how much of an impact this game had on games in general, not just first-person shooters, but just in the general trajectory of gaming. It's a big deal, and that's why I said at the beginning, like in a way, it did birth the first person shooter genre, not single-handedly, but in a way, it had its hand in that. It's a piece of gaming history, and I'm probably not going to replay it, but I'm glad that I had this experience because it's very important. It's an important thing.
No, and I mean it pioneered, scoped sniper rifles in video games. What is a sniper rifle? Scoped sniper rifles in video games.
It sounds like a Dr. Seuss thing.
A sniper
like a
rifle. Sniper. It almost sounds like a Dora the Explorer thing too.
It's the Wish.com version of Swiper.
Sniper.
You would get the voice actor, somebody that doesn't speak Spanish, so their accent would be poor. Oh, Dios mío, it's Sniper. And then, hey, I'm the sniper. Give me your map.
Give me the gabagool. So I went to the
if the salad is not on the side, I send it back.
That's right. No, this game changed everything, and it's very much a missing link. If you look at the history of first-person shooter games, it exists in what they call the third generation. It really, I don't know, you go back so far, you go back in time through Call of Duty and Medal of Honor and all those things, and eventually you run into GoldenEye, and you say, okay, well, what came before? And you can find Doom 64, and you can find other games, but man, this one, and even Halo. How could I dare forget Halo or leave out Halo? This game clearly even impacted, if we really think about it, games like BioShock because of what it was able to do. And that's just it. Like, it's sort of like in pizza, when you're making pizza and you've got like the mother dough, like how there's always a piece of dough from the other piece of pizza in all of the pizza for like generations. This game very much, I think, has earned that spot, and I think that's why it deserves to be in the crown of video games. You know what I mean? I'd say this is one of the most influential of all time. Full stop.
That mother dough, I'm going to be thinking about that for the rest of the day. I just want you to know that.
Have you not thought about the mother dough before?
No.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah, this is going to turn into an existential thing. No, you're right though. It in a very real way did influence even games like BioShock. And I think that's the best way to experience this game today, is to approach it in that way, to see what is the foundation upon which my favorite games are standing. How did this come to be? It's like looking up your favorite musician and saying, who were their favorite musicians? I'll listen to them. Well,
Yep.
Who were their favorite musicians? I'll listen to them. It's the DNA is in everything, much like the mother pizza, which is going to haunt me for the rest of my days. It's like Pokemon too. Like, a lot of newcomers to Pokemon are playing Sword and Shield, they're playing Arceus, but going back and replaying Red and Blue or Yellow, is it going to be the same experience? No. You might not even like it nearly as much, but it's important. it's a part of history, and I think I'm all for everybody playing this game. I think full stop. I think it's not going to hurt to play it, and it's going to make you appreciate what we have today. To sound like my grandparents would have sounded. You'll appreciate what you have if you learn what we didn't have.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, you can go around and play like, the most recent Far Cry games, and that's fine, and you should play them. At the same time, without this game, you don't have those. And thank God, Rick, that it was good. Like, thank God that it was function and that it wasn't just a buggy mess. They did a really good job with crafting this game. Yeah, thanks be to God. So, Rick, let me ask you, in all of this, if you were to, do you think you have a numerical rating?
Yeah, approaching it as a work from its time, I think it's well deserving of a 9 out of 10.
I think that's
well
fair.
Deserving.
Yeah.
There are small things about it that are annoyances. I think they did the best that they could with the controls. I especially given the 8 options that you had to change them. I think Hollis and his team made the labor of love that they were setting out to do. And, I didn't want to rate it initially just because of the way that I played it and, the fact that I didn't play it back then. So I'm approaching it from 2022. But I think a 9 out of 10 is fair. I think it's deserved and fair.
And that's just it. You experience the game even though through a different medium. I don't know. This game, it's important. It's good. It has its issues. So did Super Mario 64. You know what I mean? Like, those camera controls are just a giant pain in the ass. But again, I think they did the best they could at the time. So, yeah. GoldenEye 007.
This discussion leads me to another discussion that I want to have with you to sort of round out the episode. And I would be surprised if we differ on this, but I think it's a good discussion to have, especially while we've got folks listening. So, this discussion centers around emulation and what it means to truly experience a work, whether that is a video game, a movie, a painting, things like that. So, Ben, you played this game back then and today on original hardware.
Yep.
Well, today you didn't play on a CRTV, as far as I know.
No, I didn't.
But you did. You have in the past. You experienced it on the original hardware that was around when this came out. I, on the other hand, I emulated on my computer 60 FPS using mouse and keyboard. So this got me thinking, did I experience the game? Or put another way, is emulating a game truly experiencing the game? What are your thoughts on this?
I'm going to say 75% yes. You still played a game. You still had fun. Did you have the full experience of cursing out an N64 controller or using it in place of a hammer? No. And that's okay. I mean, those things, I dropped it last night. Victoria was like, oh my God, is it okay? And I went, this thing has seen far worse from me, Victoria.
Yeah, this was the same era as the Nokia phone. It'll be okay.
Yeah, I think I burned my Nokia phone back in anyway. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. No, I would say you still experienced the game. You still played the game. You had, what do you think? Do you think you played the game?
Here's how I feel about this issue. One of my favorite works of all time, well, I'm going to use 2 of them actually. 2 of my favorite works of all time, both by Bach, are his Goldberg variations and his monumental partita in D minor, but specifically the final movement, the chaconne. Now, Bach composed these in a time when A was not equal to 440. For those that aren't musicians, that just means the tuning was different. And modern day instruments did not exist as they do today. I have never heard these pieces played live, which is another issue, on period instruments. And I am comfortable saying that I have experienced these works in their full capacity.
That's fair.
Now, when it comes to GoldenEye, I think it would be beneficial for me to play on an N64 on that controller, and even on a CRTV. And hell, man, I'll be honest with you. If money and resources weren't a factor, I would play every old game on a CRTV on original hardware. But that shit gets expensive, frankly. And here's the thing. When artists put out their work, they don't get to decide how we consume it. They don't get to decide how we interpret it. They don't get to decide how we consume it. There was this big thing, I want to say in 2020, but I could be wrong, where a filmmaker was upset that folks were watching his films on iPhones because that's not how he wanted them to experience it.
Fascinating.
And I think that's such bullshit, dude. It's like if I watch, I wouldn't watch The Lighthouse on my phone, but if I did, I don't think that I'm experiencing it fundamentally less than somebody that's watching it on a TV versus somebody that's watching it at the IMAX versus somebody that's watching it on film at a theater.
Well, and the other side of it is that if somebody's watching a movie on their phone, they are acutely aware that they are watching a movie on their phone. And they should be able to say, you know what, I'm not experiencing this on a big screen. And they shouldn't rate it any differently for that. You know what I mean? Like, I think I'm hearing what you're saying.
I know exactly what you mean, but to say, like, my argument is you can't just say that, oh, well, you've never seen The Lighthouse because you watched it on your phone. You know, you've never heard Le Tombeau because you only heard it on YouTube. It's where does it end at that point? I feel so strongly about this because I'm a big fan of older games, and truly, we're doing an episode on Final Fantasy VI here, not too long. And that is a game, until this Pixel remaster came out, that we would have likely had to emulate. And truly, I emulated it for the first time when I played it for the first time. And I don't feel like I experienced it any less than playing it on original hardware.
And that's what I'm saying. I think you still experienced it. I don't get me wrong, the controller is a great way to take it in, as is a, 75-inch television for watching a Miyazaki movie. You know what I mean? I
think the music example is the easiest one because literally everybody at this point, I would say 95% of people that have internet access have watched some kind of live performance or recorded performance on YouTube through their phone or through their computer speakers. And I don't think it's fair to say that somebody hasn't experienced a composition because they didn't hear it live or because they didn't hear it on period instruments.
No, absolutely not.
It's cool, though. It's cool to hear it on period instruments and cool to hear it live. But, fundamentally, they still experienced the work. Same. And, I kind of feel that way with emulation. If I'm emulating, let's say Mario Kart, if I were to emulate Mario Kart and play like on my keyboard, that sucks. I mean, it's going to feel better on an SNES controller.
Yeah. No, I think
sorry, go.
I was just going to say, no, I think the music example as well as the movie example, I think it all makes sense. I think this is all fair. And I think for people to say like, well, you didn't really play it. I don't think so. I think you still played it. And I think that, whatever movie you're watching, it's still, I'm sorry, is somebody consuming your art even through an iPhone? Is someone still using Spotify to enrich their lives by listening to the Goldberg variations? Like, no one's less or anything like that. That's kind of what it gets into. I don't like that.
Right. And I think it was Scott the Woz. He's one of my favorite video game YouTubers. He mentioned playing Mario Kart 64 on the Wii, I think on the Wii U, like using the gamepad as a controller feels kind of weird because you're thinking like I could just be playing Mario Kart 8, So there is that aspect to it, but playing on the original hardware is great. Like I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. But it becomes an accessibility issue too. Like a good functioning N64 is going to run you between 100 to 150 right now. One controller if you're lucky. Finding the James Bond game, a working one, finding a CRTV.
Might be worth even more the game itself.
it's an expensive hobby. And as much as I would love, and I genuinely mean that, to play like PS1 games on an old school TV, I just don't have the funds to make it happen. It's an accessibility issue.
Well, and literally nobody on this planet, listeners, we're talking to you and to the universe. Like, nobody should. I mean, thanks be to God for Steam, right? Thanks be to God for emulating. Because it's all ways to get things into your house without having to buy all the equipment. Well, you bought a computer. Sure, I did. But like, I don't need to buy every other system. You know what I mean? That I previously would have needed. That's awesome.
Right. And I think another important caveat to mention too is that we're not suggesting that you emulate everything.
Yes.
Right? Like, GoldenEye is not readily purchasable on the Nintendo Online Store, nor is it on Steam. That's not our fault, and there's nothing we could do about it. We're not saying that you should emulate Elden Ring and deny that studio the money that they deserve for making such a good game. That's important too. Like, don't steal just because you can.
No.
Yeah, I was hoping to end with that conversation because it gets into some of the more ethical things about, art consumption and things like that. And I knew we would be on the same page, but I hope the listeners got something out of this, and maybe it got them thinking. Maybe they disagree with us vehemently or agree wholeheartedly.
Well, Rick, if they do disagree with us, there are a few ways they could get in touch with us, isn't there?
There sure is. You are the Segway master today.
I don't own a Segway.
I was gonna say I'm gonna buy you one.
No, please don't.
There was a time when those were like the Google Glass. That was gonna be the future, and then it fell off hard. Anyway, Ben, you are right. If our listeners did disagree or agree either direction and want to let us know, you can let us know in a few ways. On Twitter, we are at pixelprojectpod. We are active there. We are also on the Instagram, Pixel Project Radio Podcast. That is our name, I believe, and our @. We also have a good old-fashioned email address, pixelprojectradio@gmail.com. Any messages and strings of words you send there will reach our eyes.
We care.
Yeah, and we encourage it. We've also got a Discord. That's the last way that you can contact us and hang out with us, and all of these will be in the show notes. We hope you reach out and join our community because it's a lot of fun.
We have fun.
We do have fun. As always, ratings and reviews are super appreciated if you have the time and you care to do so. We'll see those on Podcast Addict and Apple Podcasts. That's where we're looking mainly, though you can also rate on Spotify. And of course, as always, sharing with other people. That is super, mega, ultra, hyper appreciated. Cannot tell you how much we love to see that.
We do. Please, word of mouth is the best way to get things out. And let us know if we can promote anything for you. We're here for you too, silly.
Yeah. Got a recipe you like? Throw it our way.
Yeah.
We'll make it. We'll eat it on air. We'll promote it that way.
That's right. You've covered all of the social meds, so I think we're about ready to go here, pal.
Yeah. Good talk. Good game. Good talk.
Good game. Good talk. Better friends. Best.
Now take a walk.
Best. Rub-a-dub-dub. Thanks for the grub. Amen. Am I right?
Something like that. As always, I am Rick Firestone.
I am Ben Bugale. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.